Hello everyone, Vincent here from HDTV Test here. Normally I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator, but today we're going to do an HDR analysis of one of the latest HDR games to hit the market, namely Battlefield 5. Now before you ask, the review of the Sony ZF-9 is coming. I know I've taken a long time to do it, but that's because there are a lot of things to check, a lot of things to cover. So thank you for your patience. Sorry I have to disappoint you again on this occasion, but the review is definitely coming. The next video I put out will be a review of the Sony ZF-9, also known as the Bravia Z9F in the USA. Sorry, I just have to put that in there, both model numbers, because I like to cover both European and North American regions, because I'm going global in it. But back to Battlefield 5. If you remember a few weeks ago, I did a video analyzing the HDR output of Red Dead Redemption 2 from the Xbox One X console. And on that occasion, I worked very closely with this fine gentleman called Adam Fairclough, who also goes online by a user handle of Evil Boris. And he has kindly agreed to work with me on this video because Adam has designed this really wonderful, I call it a Luminance Heat Map system that allows us to instantly visualize the luminance output from HDR games. And I'm going to explain what we are actually seeing in this split screen comparison here. So to clarify, this is a screenshot from Battlefield 5. The original screenshot is actually taken in HDR format from the Xbox One X console, but because I have to film this video in SDR, and most of you are most likely going to be watching this video in SDR on your SDR display. This is actually tone mapped to an SDR output, but as you can see probably from the ZF-9, it is a very bright TV. You still can get some HDR impact even though this is an SDR output. So on your left, it is the tone mapped SDR output, whereas on the right here is actually the corresponding image, but overlaid by this HDR luminance heat mapping that Adam has designed. So you can see here a color scale, and depending on the code value in the game itself, they will be represented based on this color scale here. So anything that is SDR, by SDR I mean from 0 nits to 100 nits, it is going to be monochrome, whereas anything higher, they will be represented by different colors on screen. And as you can see here, the brightest element on the screen is definitely the sun, and you can see by the color here that it is matching to roughly around 2000 nits. So we know that the sun should actually be displaying at 2000 nits, but obviously most of the HDR TVs out there are not capable of hitting 2000 nits calibrated, so they have to do some tone mapping. But I have to stress that this is a raw video capture output from the Xbox One X console, so it is not dependent on the tone mapping or the display mapping. It is just taking the raw output from the game itself to tell us how bright these elements should be, and therefore this heat map luminance system allows us to visualize that very easily. Take it away, Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam Fairclough, otherwise known in the online realms as Evil Boris, and I'm here to have an in-depth look at some of the HDR output of games. Video games are often a place where you can really give our displays a workout when it comes to HDR, with many titles being visually striking and full of all the kinds of details that really helps to make high dynamic range visible. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at EA and DICE's latest game in the Battlefield series, Battlefield 5. This is probably the 8th game using the Frostbite engine that supports HDR, and whilst everything using it from FIFA to Star Wars Battlefront 2 does a really great job, we can really see them starting to get comfortable with HDR development in this title. Let's take a look. Upon first boot, you're going to be greeted with the so-called Hdr Brightness setting. Leave this at 50%, we'll talk more about this later. Hdr Peak Brightness, set this simply as described. This screen is roughly equivalent to a 5% window, albeit with a few extra elements on the screen which technically makes it larger. This should broadly match the output of your display at a 5% window. Just so you know how it works, the right hand side of the box contains maxed out HDR code values of 1024 or 10,000 nits. Your display will display the brightest it possibly can. The values are set so high that it will hit the display's upper tone mapping or clipping values. What you are doing is to use the adjustment to bring the left-hand side of the box to a point where it just reaches the internal display tone mapping values, and both boxes look just as white as each other. Now, bearing in mind we're at a 5% window size, you may choose to nudge it slightly higher, and this will ensure the game can still deliver those high values for slightly smaller areas. If you cannot make the left-hand side of the box as white as the right, then either your display configuration isn't working as intended, or perhaps you have a display which is tone mapping from 4000 nits. Some of the 2016 LG OLED models do this in certain picture modes and in the presence of no metadata. No metadata being the case for all video games on all the consoles. So to kick off the intro, we're dropped into Norway at night time, where we can immediately see the northern lights alongside the titles. Interestingly, the game uses 400 nits output for titles and most HUD elements and menu elements, which is really good for visibility but perhaps suboptimal from an overall image quality perspective. It will likely influence the display's tone mapping and local dimming algorithms, possibly drawing luminance away from other parts of the image where it would be better used. Against the night sky, the soft green glow of the Aurora Borealis is delivering just shy of 100 nits, which comparatively versus playing an SDR is a significant increase in luminance. HDR helps to deliver a more natural on-screen representation of this phenomenon. Bullets are flying past, you should see explosions, and you'll see all these things hitting around about 2000 nits on a regular basis. You'll see these pink flashes on the right hand side of the screen indicating these similar 2000 values coming from artificial light sources, or even from light bouncing off the huge chunks of snow falling from the sky. These particle effects are really carefully lined within the lighting system of the game. They all take on the physical properties, whether they reflect or emit light. See these embers floating from the flames? These are producing light. The nighttime sequence delivers some of the most impactful, high contrast HDR that money can get, pushing your displays in ways that we don't often see in movie content. This intro sequence continues through several times of day and through various lighting conditions, but just like countless other blockbuster games, they've chosen to start us off in this nighttime area with flaming rubble, something we see all the time. Let's hop across and go and look at some daylight scenes. The next sequence in the intro gives us this really saturated orange sunset. This sequence makes great use of the HDR due to the high luminance output of the sun and the low nit shadow detail. Even with this very extreme contrast, it's worth noting the natural lower contrast, lower saturation sky that can appear on screen simultaneously. This is a really great example of single frame dynamic range, giving us really high impact visuals, high contrast, and at the same time everything in between. Let's go back to the brightness settings. I believe that when we're playing in HDR, 50% is the native value for this game. Going above or below this adjusts away from how the game is perhaps best experienced. These types of settings are typically kept away from the Hdr calibration workflow. It is a bit strange that the game gives what appears to be poor advice as to how to set it up upon its first boot. It's perhaps a leftover from the SDR setup. If you do as it says, the overall light output is reduced, killing the increased luminance and making the game almost uncomfortably dark to play. However, if you are playing in SDR, this setting does behave mostly as expected. Setting this to 20% will deliver an optimal image, getting our black point as low as it can be without crushing any detail. Beyond the HDR part of the presentation, 20% looks very much like 50% would do in HDR, suggesting that this is the place where we want to be at for both modes. You could go a little lower if you wish in HDR and save some of that peak luminance for only the very brightest of objects, but I felt that the image started to become underexposed very quickly, even going as far as looking like the daytime was evening on some levels. Battlefield 5 has a few quirks common to Frostbite games. The in-game display mapper actually allows you to set the max luminance to 0 nits. This is thoroughly pointless, but it's kind of interesting. If you do this, what you're left with is just seeing the data on screen that sits below 0 nits, so the very darkest shadow detail is visible moving around on screen. Overall, the setup is very similar to that of 2017's Battlefield 1, which even shares the same error in its brightness setup, and Star Wars Battlefront 2. Both of these games offer really great looking impactful HDR. Thank you for watching, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If there's any other games that you'd like to see me cover, leave a comment in the notes below. Thanks for watching.
So thank you Adam for lending us your expertise on this video. As he said, if you have any other HDR games that you would like to see us cover, please let us know in the YouTube section below. If you found this video useful, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.